Bralen Trice is done for the year? What are they going to do?
This is Locked On Sports Atlanta, and it's time for the Atlanta Football Party, only on Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Atlanta Football Party, your home for the best Atlanta Falcons football talk. It's local insight you can't get anywhere but right here at Locked On. I'm your host, Tanisha Batiste, alongside Mary Jarvis Davis, Aaron Freeman, and Tori McElhaney. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. And the Atlanta Football Party is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So we'll download on the Falcons' 20-13 loss to the Dolphins in game one of the preseason, including who shined and who didn't, what QB2 did, and what QB1 said. And does the NFL need to make changes sooner rather than later? We'll talk about it. But first, let's get to some resets for this team. Jarvis, the Falcons made quite a few moves after the game against the Dolphins Friday. Bralen Trice and Harrison Hand were placed on the reserve IL. Nathan Rourke was released. Wide receiver Jakeem Grant, running back Spencer Brown, and quarterback John Paddock were signed. That's a mouthful. Of course, Trice tore his ACL in Friday's game. So what's the biggest impact of losing Trice?
Early on, Trice was a guy that I kind of had my eyes on as far as, hey, this guy can come in and be a rotational guy and come in for you on third and long. But when we saw practice get started and they started putting the pads on, you start to see him being in that nickel package with a guy like Arnold Ebiketie, who's going to be counted on to be a guy to rush the passer on third down as well. So when you look at it from that standpoint, I feel like Trice, you're going to have to figure out who's going to be able to get those reps for the Falcons and be able to step in and be that guy that can potentially be the guy, that go-to guy on third and long that you're bringing in with a guy like that you're pairing with a guy like Arnold Ebiketie. So yeah, I feel like the Falcons should. I'm pretty sure that they've start making some phone calls, because if you look at it from a standpoint of what Trice, those expectations were coming in for him, not too big. Hey, being a rotational guy, I feel like there is a sense of, hey, maybe we need to start, kicking the tires on some guys that are waiting out there right now, to get those phone calls.
And Free, what do you think is the biggest impact for the Falcons in losing Trice?
Well, I think it's having another young pass rusher that you're potentially going to develop. We know what the team has in Lorenzo Carter. We know what James Smith-Williams or those guys are going to be. We don't quite know what Arnold Ebiketie and D'Angelo Malone and Bralen Trice and these guys. And if you're looking for the Falcons pass rush to be good in the present and in the future, you're hoping that some of these young guys develop. And, I think the injury to Bralen Trice is a huge setback for him on an individual basis, and, potentially leaves the Falcons with one less, potential developmental pass rusher on their roster.
Indeed. And Tori, when you heard the news that Bralen Trice not just went down, but of course that he was lost for the season, what were your thoughts about how that would impact this Falcons defense?
I mean, I was kind of beginning to pencil in this idea that Bralen Trice was going to be a starter for this defense, give or take a few weeks into the start of the season. I really did feel like he had a very, very good camp. He was somebody who showed up every single day. And I thought that, even just talking to coaches, they talked a lot about his instincts and how the game is just instinctual for him. And that in terms of a mindset and in terms of his intelligence, one coach even told me, he was like, he's light years ahead of kind of where you would think a rookie edge rusher would be at this point in time. And that was down in Miami, literally 2 days before he tears his ACL. And that's so tough from a mentality standpoint, to feel really good about this one piece that you have, talking about like a developmental guy, but also the fact that I felt like he was getting more and more reps with that starting defense as the pads went on, as time went on. Honestly, sometimes to a little bit, I do think maybe even ahead of Arnold Ebiketie on a couple of occasions, a couple of practices. So I think now that he is no longer an option for you, I think that just turns up the heat even more for someone like Arnold Ebiketie to really solidify who he is and who he can be in this league, and kind of be the workhorse, if you will, of this group and step up, because that's something that you kind of saw Bralen Trice. You could see kind of this vision for him. You could see the direction. You could see the maturation happening very, very quickly. And now that's kind of out the window. So now it does feel a bit, if you're talking about like the developmental talent, it kind of falls on Arnold Ebiketie's shoulders.
And when I was looking at the injury, just from a bird's eye view, so to speak, like when you a lot of times we see guys have that, it looks like they just tripped over something and nobody touched them and everything like that. I always kind of joke, I tweeted out on the night of the game about on Twitter and said, it looked like he got hit by a sniper, and I was like, that's immediately kind of sends that message that, oh my God, this might be really severe. There might be some long-term stuff. So, and when the news dropped, I was just like, man, that's tough because of what Tori talked about as far as, hey, what he's been showing people and not only in college, from a college standpoint, but once he got here, he started, getting worked in, and you start seeing him getting a lot more opportunities to be able to be in there with the one. So that's the truly unfortunate part. But hey, he knows exactly what he has to do to be able to be ready for 2025.
Yeah, and the Falcons, unfortunately, couldn't stop there in terms of their contingency plan because they took another blow with DeMarcco Hellams sustaining an ankle injury in Friday's game. Now, the good news is that while Hellams is going to miss some significant time, according to Raheem Morris today, the Falcons haven't lost him for the whole season. So, Free, what's the biggest impact of losing Hellams for a stretch of the season, but what's important about the possibility of getting him back?
Well, I think the biggest thing that DeMarcco Hellams was bringing to the table, depending on what the outcome of this position battle between him and Richie Grant that we've been discussing all summer long and all offseason long as one of the big ones. But, it gives you an insurance policy in the event that Richie Grant doesn't take the step forward. That we saw that last year where Richie Grant had a rough first half of the 2023 season, and then the Falcons kind of plugged in DeMarcco Hellams in the second half of that season, and it kind of helped stabilize things for their secondary. And that's sort of that plan B option, I guess, is really what is taken away. And so you kind of really need Richie Grant to step up, because if he doesn't, do you have an alternative option if DeMarcco Hellams misses a significant chunk of the regular season? Is Dane Cruikshank capable of doing those types of things? Is Micah Abernathy capable of doing those types of things? You don't really know. And at least with DeMarcco Hellams, you had someone that you at least had an idea based off of what he did for those final 7 games of last season that he could step up and fill that void. And you lose some physicality in that safety room. He was the guy that was the most physical of those guys that could be that sort of enforcer when it came to the run game and whatnot. And so that's, I think, a big blow to the Falcons secondary.
I'll say this too, that, I don't think the Falcons are resting on their laurels per se, because I know that Ian Rappaport tweeted out not too long ago that he was reporting that Justin Simmons was going to be working out with the team over the next couple of days. I think that this goes to show that even in the conversation with Bralen Trice, even in the conversation that we're having about DeMarcco Hellams, Rondell Moore and Jakeem Grant coming in and them trying to figure out if there's a way that you can make up for that. There is movement being made. And I think some stones being overturned to try and figure out what you do, because the fact that we're talking about 3 guys who had starting caliber potential at the most and at the least, like rotational importance in this team. Those are important bodies that you have to fill. And I think the Falcons are actively doing that right now, literally as we speak. And I think that even Raheem Morris said earlier today when we were talking to him, like, hey, expect there to be moves made over the next week, because especially when you get to, here's the thing, we're not even talking about a 53-man cut down. When that 53-man cut down happens, I think there'll be even more moves made to bring guys in who maybe fell off of other 53-mans for one reason or another that could come in and plug and play here and kind of be more of those rotational assets that you kind of need right now.
And I think that when you think about what Hellams going down, I think that kind of limits like the flexibility that Jimmy Lake has as a defensive coordinator. Because when you think about, you have a guy like Hellams who can be an enforcer. You talking about maybe a dime type linebacker type situation when you're trying to disguise coverages and have Richie Grant and Jesse Bates in the game at the same time. So when you think about, limiting what you're able to do on the defense, I'm not surprised at all that the Falcons are looking at Justin Simmons. And Aaron and I, we talked about this on the postcast right after. I felt like if you're talking about ranking the importance of, replacing said position, safety was number one for me, because I knew for a fact, we know what we were going to get out of Trice. We knew that he was working his way towards getting that playing time, but we knew for a fact that whether or not Hellams won that starting position against Richie Grant, we knew that he was going to play a lot, and I knew he was going to be an important piece of what Jimmy Lake was trying to do on defense. So, I feel like this that makes sense, all the sense in the world, because the Falcons, they understand the sense of urgency that they need to have.
Indeed. And the good thing is what Raheem Morris said, which is that he'll miss a significant amount of time, but I still kind of take an encouragement in that at least we haven't lost him for the season. So talk about players who shined, talk about players who didn't. What did QB2 do? But what did QB1 say? It's all under further review when we return. This episode of the Atlanta Football Party is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to move quickly to find the right professional for your role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. It helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. So in a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, looking in the wrong place. And on LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free and do what 2.5 million small businesses are doing by using LinkedIn for hiring. Terms and conditions do apply. All right, guys, I know now you have had some time to kind of reflect, maybe review some of the film from Friday's game. So, Tori, let's start with who impressed you.
I really liked what I saw from the second team defensive line. So I'm talking Contavious Street, Taquan Graham, Zach Harrison. I thought that what we did see of them, which wasn't very much, but what we did see, I thought was pretty impressive. I know Contavious Street had like back-to-back plays where he was just absolutely demolishing his guy and getting into the backfield. And Zach Harrison really kind of blew up the play that allowed for Kevin King to make that first interception. So I think though that trio of guys was, I think I talked a lot on our own podcast and even on the show that I did with Kelly Price and Fox 5 was that like, I loved watching this defensive line work over the course of joint practices. They did not, especially that first team, like did not make it easy on Tua at all in the pocket, especially in like these hurry up situations, especially inside the red zone. From what I could see, that especially that first day they were on one, and it was really interesting to watch. And so the fact that they were able to carry that over into early success and early disruption, I thought was a good sign. I also really liked what I saw from the connection between Michael Penix Jr. and Casey Washington. I think because of the run.
Hold that thought. I want to ask you about Penix in a second, Tori.
Go ahead.
I see where you're going, but I'm coming back to you. All right, Free, who impressed you?
Well, if I can't say Michael Penix, let's see. Like Corey, I thought the defensive line did some things. I thought the cornerbacks did some things. Kevin King had an interception. I thought Antonio Hamilton did a really good job. He was kind of throwing his weight around in run support, showed some tight coverage there. And so having those two sort of veterans on the outside at that cornerback position to be potential options. We talk about, Mike Hughes and the Clark Phillips battle at that outside cornerback spot and what that position may bring. But, we talk about these insurance options in the event that doesn't go the way that the Falcons want it to go. And, we get to October and we're saying, hey, maybe we need to make a change there. Having two veterans like Antonio Hamilton, who's been in the league for, bounced around for several teams for 6 or 7 years, Kevin King, similar sort of experience, and those guys showing why they have been able to stick in this league and play in this league for a long time, being able to lock down some of those Miami wide receivers.
And Jarvis, when you think back to what you saw Friday night, now that you've had a couple days to kind of digest it, who impressed you?
Wow. For me, it has to be D'Angelo Malone, because he's a guy that I've always had my eye on, because he's from around the way. A friend of mine used to coach him in high school, so kind of following him along, especially when the Falcons brought him in. And then, of course, he's the guy that was drafted with the Matt Ryan pick, right? Compensation, right? So, I'm always gonna have to keep my eye on him. But it was really good to see him out there just flying around on special teams. He had a couple tackles on special teams that really just impressed me. Like, because when you think about, we talked about Trice earlier as far as him being done for the year. Can he sneak in there and get some of those reps, right? Can he get into that rotation of being a guy that can come in and sub on those sub packages on nickel when it's third and long? So I feel like he did himself a good service by, flying around on special teams, because we understand how important that is, especially for those outside linebacker guys, edge guys, about as far as making this team, because that's the way you're going to make this team. And then once you make your team, establish yourself there, then you start working to try to get into that rotation, because we know that he feels like he has a lot to prove, for sure.
Yeah. All right, T. Now it's time. After the game, Coach Ross said, I felt really good about Michael. It was fun to see him go out there and execute some of the pass plays, lead the offense, getting them in and out of the huddle. A pretty good night for him. So what stood out for you with Michael Penix Jr.'s 9 of 16, 104-yard performance in that first preseason game?
I think it was kind of what I expected it to be. I didn't expect it to be perfect, but I did expect him to have these moments where you saw why the Falcons decided to draft him where they did, and why they were worried that he wouldn't fall to them later on in the draft. And I think the way that he was composed and handled himself and handled the pocket, and also just talking to some different guys about the way he leads, I think is notable as well. I thought that and I'll go back to what I was saying before, the connection that he had with Casey Washington. Casey Washington is someone that I think a lot of people are sleeping on right now, and you shouldn't, because of everything that's happened with Rondell Moore now being on IR. I think this kind of opens up the door a little bit for someone like a Casey Washington to see maybe a little bit of extended playing time and reps with Kirk Cousins and the ones, because that's something that we slowly started to see Rondell Moore getting more and more of. But I thought that the fact that there were a few times, and it was interesting because during the game, I kept being like, Michael Penix, his arm talent is so it's so there, and it's so strong that he's overshooting Casey Washington all the time. But then you talk to Casey Washington, and he was like, no, I put this on me. Like, I need to put myself in a better position. I need to be where he's throwing me good balls. I need to do better myself. And I thought that was very interesting, because it's like, even in the 9 of 16 that we're talking about, how many of those, maybe with, a step here or a timing route there, there's a difference there. So I think overall it was a good first step in the right direction. I wouldn't say that it's perfect. I think there's still a ton to go off of here, but it's a nice start for 5 series in a preseason game.
Yeah. And believe it or not, my Sunday radio show had our Locked On Dolphins postcast host. We were co-hosting that show, and Michael Penix Jr. was one of the quarterbacks that he kind of put at the top of the chain. But to your point, Tori, it was because he showed us what we thought. It was almost like just because it was confirmation of what we thought he could do. So it was interesting to kind of hear the other side and how impressed they were with his performance as well. So what about you, Free? What impressed you? What were your thoughts on, I'll call them MPX, as Jarvis calls them, MPX's performance?
Well, yeah, I think, as Tori said, it wasn't perfect. Like, there was maybe a throw or two that, he might have missed because maybe his footwork wasn't clean. That was kind of the big question mark that I had for Michael Penix. But that to me was something that's going to take, the Falcons have 2 years to clean those things up. So, the fact that he didn't come out in his first NFL preseason game and had flawless mechanics and flawless footwork, to me was not something that I'm going to hold against him. And so otherwise, to me, I was very impressed with everything else he did in this game. And I thought one of the more impressive things that he didn't get to show that much at Washington because their offense was just so built around we're just going to chuck it deep, 40 yards down the field to Roma Dunze and all those guys. And to me, the thing that I think was the underrated skill set of Michael Penix that I thought you could just, like, if you really were studying the film, you could see glimpses of his ability to operate, was kind of the quick game stuff and being decisive and getting the ball out quickly on these 5-yard throws to Chris Blair and Casey Washington and being able to kind of, manipulate the defense with this sort of quick game that, forces defenses to kind of cheat up, and then you can hit them over the top with the long ball. And so that to me was one of the things that was impressive because I thought he had great decision-making in college, and it seems like it's translating well to the NFL. And I think that's going to be something that if you can have Michael Penix being able to kind of dink and dunk your way down the field, in addition to being able to hit some of those big-time throws down the field, that's going to be a really difficult recipe for NFL defense to deal with in the future.
Something that came up during joint practices when we were able to talk to Michael, actually, and I think it's really interesting that you bring up Washington because we were talking about the difference in what he was asked to do with Washington and now what he's asked to do with Zach Robinson and this Falcons team. And he made the comment, he was like, yeah, it's not really like anything that I have done before. It's not necessarily what I am used to or what is comfortable. He was like, however, I feel like it fits me very well. And I think that, to your point, Free, about his ability to read defenses and to be okay just kind of like 5 yards here, 5 yards there, you take what the defense is going to give you. That's actually something that even I go back to conversations that I was having with scouts about Michael Penix, is that like he can beat you at different layers of the field. It's not like he's just has this incredible arm strength, which he does, and he can beat you 40 yards downfield. He also has, I think, the awareness to understand, like, okay, the defense is giving me this. That's all. That's what we're going to do. We're just going to pick up 5 yards here. We're going to pick up 10 yards here. We're going to pick up 4 yards here. Like, I'm going to check down to whoever my running back is, Carlos Washington, Jace McClellan, when I need to. So all of that, I think, it goes hand in hand to this conversation of he understands that, okay, even though this offense is sort of kind of new to me, it still fits me and it fits my ability to be a playmaker still.
Yeah, and kind of just to add what you were saying, Free. I think one of the cool things is when you hear Casey talking about like what Tori mentioned as far as like, hey, that was on me. And when you look at the film, you look at the play on that particular deep ball. I'm assuming that's what you were talking about, T, is the fact that he turned around and started looking for the ball like early. And when you think about, go back and bring a reference to last year, like when you don't know when that ball is coming, like that means the world to wide receivers to know that the ball is going to be there. And then for Casey to admit that at post game, it just goes to show you like these guys have a lot of experience with MPX and as far as dealing with him in practice, and they understand that, hey, the ball is going to be there. Same thing with Kirk, and the ball is going to be there to the point where Kirk is saying, hey, man, I need you to be here when I hit that back foot, that fourth step or that fifth step on, because the ball is coming out. I need you to be in a certain place. So for Casey and MPX to be able to have that type of communication and understanding this early, it lets you know that, hey, MPX is right where he needs to be, and Casey is showing people that, hey, man, I belong here too. I play a little ball too. So yeah, and you can see it. It was definitely on display Friday night.
So QB2 had a solid night on Friday, and the surrounding supporting cast did too. We're going to talk about that and what Kirko had to say about it in What's Next. This episode of the Atlanta Football Party is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, patience, the formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your parts guaranteed to fit your ride or die every time, or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions do apply, and eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Locked On Sports Today is a free 24/7 sports streaming channel and is programmed to bring you the biggest stories daily without all the noise. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So let's go back and, we're talking a lot about QB2 and what we saw him do, but QB1 had some things to say on the sideline that I thought were really interesting. He had a sideline interview in the second quarter of Friday's game, and Kirk Cousins was asked what his relationship with Zach Robinson had been like. So Kirk said, quote, "Zach is a great football mind. He's calm, and I'm a little more fiery and intense. We'll kind of balance each other. We're both new here, and so we're kind of going through this together. We got to make up for lost time." So Aaron, what do you think Kirk meant when he said making up for lost time, and how do you think that gives insight into how he'll approach this season?
Well, I think Kirk's spoken about it a number of times where there is familiarity with this offense with Zach Robinson, with Kirk, Zach coming from LA under Sean McVay and Kirk playing under Sean McVay when they were both in Washington, and, Kevin O'Connell the last couple of years, another McVay protege. And so Kirk has spoken about the similarities in this offense from what he's done in the past, but there's like little different things that they're going to be asking him to do in Atlanta that he didn't quite do in Minnesota or didn't quite do in Washington. That's a little bit different than what he's done. And I think that's really what Kirk is talking about, is trying to master those things, between now and the start of the regular season, because, when that happens, like, this team is going to be primarily driven by their offensive success. If they're going to be a playoff team, it's going to be because their offense is good. And I think that's really what Kirk is trying to get to, is getting to a point where he has that mastery. He has the familiarity, but he has the mastery. And I think that's what he's referring to when he's talking about making up for lost time, where it's just like, we need to get on the same page, and we're working there, but it feels like we have to kind of speed that up because we want to get to week one, and, we want to put a 30 burger on the Pittsburgh Steelers at a, revenge and all the things that are going to happen
right.
with that one. But I think that's really what Kirk is getting at.
Yeah, it's something as simple as, like, sometimes just terminology. Sometimes, like, the same thing is called something different, like with each play caller, within each scheme, all that kind of stuff. So I really do think it's something as simple as that Kirk's talking about. And I know that and this is something that we talked about, right when camp started, I feel like they're actually very, very far along. And I think that's a testament to the fact that you do have someone like Kirk Cousins who is leading this offense. When you have a veteran guy who has a familiarity with the scheme to the level of which he does, I just feel like it allows you to hit the ground so much quicker, and it allows you to feel way more comfortable than you would have if there wasn't that familiarity, or if there wasn't this level of experience that Kirk Cousins has. Like, this is year 13 for him. There are very few things that are going to be thrown at him that he hasn't seen before in 13 seasons. So for that, I just do think that adds a level of ease and comfort when your signal caller is, in this case, this, like, true veteran presence who has this familiarity, who understands kind of how things should be run and what success looks like. It just helps, I think, trickle around to the guys around him who it is more of a brand new type of scheme and brand new type of looks and brand new stuff that they're being asked, whether it's Kyle Pitts, Bijan Robinson, Drake London, this offensive line. I mean, you think about it, like, Kirk is the one that has the most mastery out of anybody on this offense, and that matters. And not just does that matter, but that's something that should pay dividends early on in the season, because it just helps you out. It kind of has this, like, trickle out effect.
Mm-hmm.
I love the fact that Kirkwood said balance. That's the key word for me, because Raheem Morris talked about how At halftime, offensive line coach Dwayne Leverett said, "Hey man, I need y'all to get some bodies, get some hands on some folks when we turn around and hand the ball off." And you kind of saw that little jump, because in the first half you saw some guys on the ground missing blocks, and it just didn't look right. It had the procedural stuff, and then snaps and all that stuff going on. So when you look at it from that standpoint, I feel like Kirk mentioning balance, it kind of really stands out to me, because I really feel like this offense will have success if they remain balanced, because we understand all the pretty toys they got on the line up outside: Drake London, Kirk, Kyle and Bijan and Tyler Algier. You got all these weapons, right? Darnell Mooney, sometimes I feel like he gets forgotten about, but like, coach wants to run the ball, and I feel like as long as Zach Robinson understands that and Kirk understands that, because the more they're able to run the ball and have success, this offense can really, really go. We talk about how Free say putting up a 30 burger against Pittsburgh. I feel like that can be more than attainable if they're able to do that.
Yeah. And Tori talked about mastery when you have someone like Kirk Cousins under center. Hold
on, T. Hold on. Tori McElhaney was on the television broadcast too. Now let's not forget about that. Now we have a star right here. Yes, and we will not finish this show before we talk about that. Like, come on now, Tori. Like, I heard you breaking it down now. Like how did that come about? Because the folks need to know, because when I saw AtlantaFalcons.com, Tori McElhaney, I'm like, oh, okay, let's go. What we talking about here? Come on.
Yeah. No, I'm really glad that they asked me to come on. It was funny because they're like, we'll do, come down there for the start of the fourth quarter, and then I can't remember who it was, but I think like Mutant absolutely waylaid a guy, and it was a really bad hit. And I was in the middle of talking about like Raheem making fun of my accent, and I was like, I need to shut up. Someone just like put duct tape over my mouth. Like, I need to stop talking. But no, it was a really good experience. And it was nice because they were kind of asking me about, how Raheem has implemented his own culture and kind of what that means for this team, and also talking about Kirk Cousins' accuracy. So yeah, it was great. I'm shocked that you brought it up, but thank you.
Awesome, Tori. And bigger things to come. So that's just a little starting point, right?
Exactly.
Starting to make it, baby. Let's go.
Exactly. Thanks to our everydayers for making the Atlanta Football Party your first listen of the day. Be sure to stop by Locked On Falcons for your second listen, and be sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're also free and available wherever you download your podcasts. We'll see you tomorrow on the Atlanta Football Party, the Dogs edition.